Psalm 8. Psalm 8 in verse 3 and 4 says, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you take thought of him, and the son of man that you care for him?" Psalm 8, 3 and 4. The word transcend has the basic meaning of climbing, to climb, or to climb so high that you cross some boundary. A transcendent experience is one that takes you out of yourself and convinces you of a larger life or existence, almost something close to the word spiritual. And so from this idea of to climb, to cross some obstacle, then it's interesting that the word then means to overwhelm or to be surpassed. And then the meaning shifted to the idea of something that is transcendent, something that cannot be crossed, a border that cannot be breached, something far too great that ever could be surmounted. And thus we come to the idea of a transcendent God, that he exists apart from the creation and is not subject to the natural or physical limitations of the universe. In 1 John chapter 1 and verse 5, God is free from darkness. In him there is no darkness at all, no sin. He cannot lie. He always tells the truth, stated Titus 1 verse 2. He is untouched by death and time and the limitations that govern our physical reality. And that would be true in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. Time has no impact on God. Time is really nothing to God. A day is like 1,000 years. He is uncreated, and he does not depend on anyone for existence. He does not become stronger if more people believe in him, or weaker if fewer do. God is completely separate from this creation. And he does not need anyone for his existence. And that would be Acts chapter 17 and verse 25, which would tell me that the reason that God created man is not because he was lonely. Rather, the reason that God creates man probably is something akin to that the existence and the joy that he is able to experience and the life that he's a giver, and he must share that with others. He is also immensely concerned about what happens to us. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 16, and it is this God, the transcendent God, that invites us to enter into a relationship with him in the book of Revelation chapter 3 verse 20, or Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Psalm 8, Derek Kidner in his commentary on the Psalms stated that this psalm is an unsurpassed example of what a hymn should be, celebrating as it does the glory and grace of God, rehearsing who he is, what he has done, and relating us and our world to him. It both begins and ends with God. How excellent is thy name. It has maybe one of the most, I'm not sure if it's famous, but often remembered statements in the Psalms. What is man? What is man that God cares for him, that God pays attention to him, that God watches out for him? That question has pursued the human race and still is haunting the human race. Years ago, Carl Sagan says, as long as there have been humans, we have searched for our place in the cosmos. Where are we? Who are we? We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star, lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of a universe in which there are far more galaxies than people. That statement kind of makes me sad. If that's how we view the universe, if that's how we view ourselves, that we're in kind of a humdrum sort of thing, that's not a very good answer. Psalmist had a different answer. As he looked at the universe, he was absolutely amazed at the fact that God, in this immense galaxy, and we're this speck, that God cares for us. and that the psalmist doesn't use words like insignificant or forgotten or humdrum. It's something the exact opposite. Well, we're reminded in Psalm 8 that God is above the heavens. God rules over all and manifests his greatness. God's glory is seen in what he has made, Romans 1:20 and Psalm 19:1, but also in what is beyond the creation is a far greater manifestation of his glory. Remember that the wonder of God himself is far greater than the wonder of what he has made. And out of everything that God has made, from stars to the smallest cell or whatever, from stars to starfish, you might say, only man can look at the scene and ask the question, what is man? Of everything that's on the planet, of everything that's in the universe, only man asks that question. Only man lifts up his eyes. Ecclesiastes 3:11, the point is made that eternity has been placed in man's heart. And of all the creatures, of all the beings created in the early chapter of Genesis, only man is said to be made in God's image. Only man has this sense of eternity. Man has this sense of, has a spiritual component to him. And so, and as we look out, we can tell that this earth has been designed to be inhabited, Psalm 45 and verse 18, and that the Creator did not plan some empty, meaningless universe. And so, why is it that only man can consider the heavens? Only man does that. Only man lifts up his eyes and really considers and thinks about the deep questions of life. And I think it has to be because he is made in God's image. That's the only verse that makes sense to me, because even if you're someone that would not believe in God, you still have to face the fact that man asked the question. If you're an atheist, you still have to face the fact that only man asked the question, who are we? Where are we from? We ask that question. That reality cannot be ignored. And that reality says a whole lot about who we are. Not only that, but the very fact that people can have successful careers and be talented, and then about 50 or 60 look upon all their stuff and their possessions and ask the question, whether they're a Christian or non-Christian. They might even be an atheist, but they ask the question, is this all there is? That says a lot about us. You may not believe, but you cannot hide man's religious nature, man's religious and spiritual cravings. And nothing can fill the void there. All the possessions and the pleasures and whatever else that this material world can offer, none of the accolades can fill a person up. And Jeremiah talked about that. God talked about people that were building cisterns, broken cisterns, that God is the source. Only God can fill us up. Only God can quench our thirst. Blessed are Jesus would talk about, blessed are those that, and they shall be filled. Those that hunger and thirst for righteousness, they shall be filled. Only God can fill us up. Only God can satisfy our thirst or our hunger. In every other area, we're left near the end of our lives asking the question, is this all there is? That career, the big house, all the vacations, etc., we're still empty at the end of that. So, you look at the heavens. It's interesting in Psalm 8, the word ordained pops up, and that means that which is appointed or fixed. Nothing in the universe is there by chance, not even the movements of the heavenly bodies. David looks at the universe here in Psalm 8 and is stunned and amazed that God cares for man who seems so insignificant in the vast universe on a certain level. And man has felt that for centuries. But there are portals. There are portals on this earth in which we can face and encounter and get a sense of our smallness, our limitations, our ignorance, but also a sense of the transcendent. And may I suggest to you, those portals would include the universe, the heavens, nature, just the beauty of the universe and the beauty of this world, Psalm 19:1. It would include also the Bible as we pick it up and read it, like the Sermon on the Mount, that just opens up our eyes and gives us clarity and is a breath of fresh air. Jesus Christ, as we encounter him and see his life and his teachings, his example. Like Nicodemus said, no one can do these things except you do, unless God is with him. John chapter 3, 1 and 2. And then music, art, literature. One of the purposes of the humanities was to help young people see that the world is far more than just the physical stuff around you. It is far more than just matter. And such things are intended to link you with the real you. The real you is a soul. The real you is a spirit created in God's image. And the purpose of good art and literature and good music is to link you with your Creator. That's the purpose of such. And to remind you that you're far more than just a body, that you are a spirit, and that you are going somewhere, and that you have a connection to the Creator. A good writer can describe a thing where the soul of the reader is in it. And then finally, noble acts of human behavior, noble acts of love and patience and kindness, goodness and sacrifice, unselfishness and forgiveness can connect us to the transcendent as well. At our core, we're in the image of God, Genesis 1:26. And even after the fall, we are still made in that image. James chapter 3 and verse 9. Human fads may come and go, like the winds of doctrine in Ephesians 4:14. And yet there are real and grand things that continue to capture the attention of honest men and women. Such things persist. And such things maybe are more meaningful when life is tragic, difficult, maybe when we lose sight of the value of such things when life has been a little bit too comfortable. And in the last 75 years since the Second World War, life has been very comfortable, especially in comparison with the way that life had been centuries before that. You know, when the gospel was first preached in the book of Acts to various cultures, and particularly to cultures that were a pagan culture, an unbelieving culture, that were just like the Corinthians, living for the moment. Let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Many people there responded to the gospel because it looked like they were tired of the superficial. They were tired of sin and in being in bondage to their sin. They were tired of living as if all they were was just an appetite or a gland, that's all they were. And so many of them converted to the gospel. Acts chapter 13:48, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 9 through 10. The great story of the early church is one in which individuals could not be worn down by the darkness and opted for the light instead. Romans 8:37, 1 John 2:14, Revelation 12:11. We have those that just could not be worn down. They loved God. They did not love their lives, and they were faithful even unto death. You know, the world leans toward the negative. Much of what is going on right now in the news, very negative. It's a place of self-centeredness, and with such an attitude comes constant criticism and unbelief, which always seems determined to debunk everything of value and undermine the existing order without putting anything productive in its place. It is a way of life that tears and attacks, and which believes that all the best things of life are just disguised forms of manipulation, that good deed that person did, they have an angle there. They're trying to get something. When people lose their faith, all of a sudden they want to find a lie in every truth. They want to find a hypocrite behind every Christian. They want to find an oppressor in every relationship. Thus, the message of the world is one of, and which leads to despair, corruption, shame, degradation, bitterness, resentment, darkness, being irreconcilable, shattered lives, divided men, and people that end up all alone by themselves. We become difficult. In Titus chapter 3, verse 3, Paul talks about that we were once foolish and enslaved, hateful, hating one another, living our lives in malice. The darkness will turn you into that. You end up all alone. You've burned all your bridges. All your relationships are in ruins, and you're just difficult to get along with. By contrast, the Bible offers us a different route. Yeah, it's the narrow way, not because God is not into options, not because God is not into fun. It is the narrow way because truth, by its very nature, is always narrow. We have an obligation to find the things that we should love, to find the things that are true and noble and are ennobling to us. Philippians chapter 2, verse 8. The things that bring hope, unity, peace, love, and truth to the human race. The great society that Jesus constructed, the church, the bride of Christ, where all men and women, regardless of our backgrounds and regardless of our flaws or sins, can find unity and peace and harmony in a relationship with Jesus Christ and each other. And that's the thrust of Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 through 22. My question for you is, I spent a number of my days in my life, and too much time, listening to music that did not build me up, watching movies or other forms of media that left me depressed and cynical. Are you ready to read something where you feel like, okay, let's take on the day? That's what we should be doing. That's what we should be pursuing. Pursue that which brings the best out of you. And my argument would be that only a relationship with God will really enable you to reach your true potential and to be all that you can be. Until next time, my name is Mark Dunnigan, and thanks for tuning in.